Welcome to the KBB Review podcast. I'm Andy Davis, and this is episode 1 of season 13. Yes, I know, season 13, and we're also closing in on episode 250. What can I say with the original and still the best? So with all that in mind, here's a little taste of what's coming up this season.
Distribution in and of itself, it is about moving boxes, but I think the trend that we've seen over the past 10 years is it has to be more than just moving boxes. If all you're doing is buying in stock and getting it from A to B 3 days a week, that won't be enough to maintain your business with retailers, and it won't be enough to maintain your business with suppliers.
When I first started, we were one of the first showrooms that actually took a German range on, and at the time a Spanish range. If the German company said that their delivery would be 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, trust me, at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, that delivery would arrive. The Spanish stuff, which was beautiful, you'd kind of get it mañana, and Miguel would drive from Spain wearing his slippers, and he could turn up at any time.
Within your industry, within your sector, are you outstanding? Are you leading the way? Are you average? Are you just doing the bare minimums that the legal requirements, and therefore to obviously protect people on the planet?
We're going to take not one game at a time, but we're taking a year at a time. So at the start of the year within Cutchin House, we have a pipeline of franchise partners who we look at that we would like to bring on board. And that really shapes our progress. Again, by the end of Q3 this year, we expect to have somewhere in the UK between 80 and 85 showrooms, and there will be more showrooms to follow in Q4.
Even from when I was fitting, with you being so young, even a girl in the industry, you do get a bit of a wobble here and there, but it wasn't something that I let bother me. That's how I was raised, really. You just do what you want to do. I had a sales designer here when it was just the two of us. We got called a father and daughter team quite a lot of the time, and it was like, oh no, I'm running the place at the minute.
The definition of unconscious bias, or as we sometimes call them, cognitive biases, it describes the associations we hold with our outside world and their outside conscious awareness. So it comes very much from evolution. It's triggered by our brain automatically making quick judgments and snap decisions. So if it sees something, it'll judge something. If it sees somebody, it'll judge them. It could be their height, their body weight, names, many other things. It comes way back from evolution when we were in the trees or then down on the savannas. When we saw somebody coming towards us, we very quickly need to know if it's friend, foe or possible mate.
Because you are transforming people's lives. You're potentially taking somebody who can't even make a cup of tea on their own purely because their house hasn't been designed for them, whatever, and you're giving them their independence. You're also giving them their self-esteem, and that's worth a fortune. And if you can make money out of it as well, so much the better.
Now, a new podcast season is always exciting, of course, but it's not the only thing happening in September for us here at KBB Review. For a start, it's officially our 40th birthday. We were first published way back in 1984 when Michael Jackson's Thriller became the best-selling album of all time, and while we're still going better than ever, where's he now, eh? Yeah, exactly. You've probably seen already that we've been very busy over the summer completely redesigning and relaunching the magazine, and we're very proud of the results. So I hope you like it. Let us know what you think. And we've also opened entries for the KBB Review Retail and Design Awards 2025. Yes, the biggest and best awards in the industry are back, and if you're a kitchen or bathroom retailer, designer, installer or supplier, there's a category for you, and as always, it's totally free to enter. Now get a pen, the closing date is November the 14th, and also as always, all our retailer, designer and installer finalists get to come to the awards event for free too. The event itself is on Thursday, April the 24th, 2025 in the incredible icon that is the Tower Ballroom in Blackpool. Yeah, I know. We've got a podcast episode coming up in the next couple of weeks detailing everything you need to know about the awards, including all my top tips for entering, so listen out for that. But in the meantime, all the info you need is at kbbreview.com/awards. That's kbbreview.com/awards. Okay, so for this very special episode kicking off this season, we're meeting the founder of one of the industry's most enigmatic companies, Paul O'Leary from Devol. Paul and his team have managed to establish the hugely successful Devol as a true lifestyle brand that, yes, will make you a beautiful traditional kitchen, but they do it by inviting you into their world and giving you the whole warm and uniquely British Devol experience. It's amazing. As a lot of you will know, they're based in Coates Mill, a 16th century watermill set in 12 acres of natural meadows on the banks of the River Soar just outside Loughborough. Absolutely beautiful. And this rambling 5-storey building and its gardens have since become synonymous with the Devolve brand and featured heavily in its own Emmy-nominated TV show For the Love of Kitchens. And if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend seeking it out via the Devolve YouTube channel, and you'll hear Paul and I talk about it in this conversation. He himself is the absolute embodiment of Devolve, and to hear him talk about the philosophy of it and his views on design and customers, it's just fascinating, as well as just listening to him tell his own personal story and journey. It's amazing, and it all makes up an interview that I guarantee you just won't want to miss a word of. Enjoy. So here is Paul O'Leary. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Andy. Nice to speak to you.
Very nice to speak to you too. I'm a big fan of yours, a big fan of Devolve's. I'm finally glad that we get to have a bit of a conversation and find out a bit more about how you tick. I'm actually going to start with probably what's a very simple question, but probably has a very complicated answer. To the outside world, Devolve is such a distinct company with a very clear look and approach. Like, I've heard the name used in a very descriptive way, you know, oh, that's very Devolve. But do you have a clear view of it? Is there a defined philosophy, or is it all in your head and you know it when you see it?
I think a bit of both. There's certainly a traditional look to our furniture. And even though the furniture, we have various different ranges and they're different styles, they all seem to have that in common. They kind of hark back to a different time. They're certainly not meant to look modern. And I think there's a good reason for that, because most people live in 100, 200-year-old houses in this country, or certainly a very large proportion, and they're our customers. And when choosing a kitchen for your house, unless it's your final resting place, it's just a stepping stone. And so I've always advised people that they'd do well to think about not just what their taste is for a kitchen, but what the future buyer of their house's taste is likely to be. And so if you stick with kind of traditional shaker-styled kitchens in a 100-year-old house, and you paint it muted natural colours, and you don't go mad, then there's a good chance when you do come to sell your house in 5-10 years' time, that the moment where the new family walks through to the kitchen, the moment they're waiting and hoping that they're going to see their dream kitchen, if you want to tick that box, then you should be thinking about it when you design the kitchen, even though you're intending on living in the house for the next 5 years. Otherwise, you're throwing money away. And it does increase the value of your house, of course. It makes it much more saleable. And most people are after the same thing, and they probably want the same thing as you do. So if you bear that in mind, and if your kitchen designer is having an open conversation about that, I think that's all sensible. It'll end up saving you money.
Yeah, and I think that relationship and that conversation you have with your clients is one of the things that sets you apart. But you obviously have a team of designers too, obviously working in different showrooms and at Coates Mill. How do you school them in the Devolve way? How do you get them to see the world in the way that you do?
Well, it's not just me. Helen Parker and Robin McClellan have been designing kitchens alongside me for best part of 20 years. And when we were a small company with just a handful of designers, I was training every single one of them. But now that we have 40 kitchen designers spread across different countries, I can't do that, obviously. But we have a lovely big old mill here in Leicestershire, and we have a couple of little cottages across the road. And every new designer, we ask them to come and spend some time at the mill. Now, if they've never done it before, they'll need to spend 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a year here. If that fits in with their plans, then that's great, because then we can send them out to wherever they're working, London, Bath, New York, wherever. And we know that they're going to design kitchens the Devolve way. So we've got a team of training people, and they also visit our other showrooms and spend time with the kitchen designers. And the people we choose to do that are the people that we know they've got it. They know the Devolve way. And the Devolve way is, don't cram the room full of furniture. Leave plenty of space. Make sure that there's some comfortable space and hopefully somewhere to sit and perch, even if it's just a breakfast bar, but preferably a kitchen table. And it's a constant kind of tug of war between clients and the designer. The client wants to get every single gizmo in there and have maximum storage so they can keep torches and shoe polish in their kitchen, which doesn't need to be in the kitchen. But traditionally, that's where we keep everything, ant powder. This has nothing to do with cooking or eating. but we keep them in a kitchen drawer. So we encourage people to put all those things in the garage or the shed and just have things in the kitchen that are for cooking and eating and things that they like being around. If you're in your lounge, you would expect to go into anyone's lounge and see some ornaments, maybe see some photographs, maybe some pictures, mantelpieces full of bits and bobs that they've been bought by loved ones over the years. And in the kitchen, that's not traditionally what people put in their kitchens. But of course, for the last 40 years, people have been knocking through to the next room, building extensions on the back of their house, and making a kitchen into a more sociable space. Not just a place where you do the chores, it's a place where you socialise and where everyone gathers. And now people are bringing in all of those cherished objects into their kitchen. So you might see photographs of old kitchens and they have a look. There's paintings in there. There's precious antique ceramics on display. And it makes the kitchen feel much more homely, makes you feel more at home. And it makes you love that room more than you would have done if it was stark and functional.
I certainly think that one of the things that I like about devolved kitchens is they do have that personality. They have an individual personality about them rather than it looking like they've just come out of the brochure. And that's clearly something that those designers soak up when they come and stay with you and come and live in that environment, because it's such a special little place, Coates Mill, that you can't help but come away with understanding what the philosophy is, even if no one's ever spoken it to you out loud.
Yeah, you say that it doesn't look like it's come straight out of the brochure, but actually our brochures are very carefully designed to not just show our furniture, but to show rooms with character and to show a lifestyle and a choice of gathering things to keep you company in your kitchen while you're preparing food. Things that you love, things that put you in a good mood. And I don't think kitchen designers, sit down with a client and say, no, you must get some antiques and some paintings and put those on your walls to make this kitchen look proper. They don't need to, because the type of customers that are drawn to us are the ones that follow us on Instagram. They fully embraced that style, that eclectic mix of antique and functional cupboards. And actually our creative director, Helen Parker, her kitchen has only got one Duval cupboard in it. And that's the cupboard that you must have. You have to buy that piece of furniture because it includes a sink, a dishwasher, and a pair of bins neatly tucked away. And nice to have those hidden in a nice looking piece of furniture. But all the other pieces of furniture in the kitchen, they don't need to be made by Duval. You can buy an old kitchen table. You can buy an old glazed cupboard to keep your crockery in. You can buy an old work table, where you chop vegetables. And that was Helen's choice. And that is the Duval look. I heard it called, interestingly, we're quite popular in America these days, to say the least. And I heard one comment on Helen's kitchen, which I found quite funny. They called it flea market student living. Like, they totally didn't get it. It wasn't for them. They'd rather a pristine kitchen, where they can wipe everything clean. And maybe there's a fair proportion of people who just want absolutely neat and tidy, everything put away. And they don't want furniture with character.
No, but as you say, they're never going to come to you looking for that, are they?
Well, exactly, yeah. They'll never go to Balta, who do those kitchens very well.
Let's go back in time a bit, because you are ultimately a designer. When did you, and I ask designers this a lot, because it's something that always fascinates me as a non-designer, when did you first think of design as something that people did and that you could do?
Well, that's a really nice question, because when we did our TV show, we get lots and lots of feedback from customers, and it's a real insight into what they like and why they're drawn to Duval. And the bit that I loved the most of all the comments, and it happened a lot, was that people would sit down with their kids. And I remember one particular lady said, I saved the last episode for my daughter's 11th birthday as a special treat for her. I know, obviously, I write back to these people and I say, oh, it's so lovely to hear. And they tell me all about what interests them. And they say, oh, I want to be like Robin. I want to learn how to use a lathe. Most 11-year-olds don't know what a lathe is. But if they watch our TV program and they like lovely Coates Mill and the wildlife, and then they see young designers who are straight out of uni and they're making something, young people are drawn to this and they feel like, oh, I want to be able to make things. I want to learn how to do sand casting. I want to learn how to do woodworking. The idea of making something is something that's just, the seed has been sown by them watching the program. And that feels really satisfying.
Yeah, what was your version of that?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody sowed that seed for me. I think my first experience of any type of design was I liked helping my mum in the garden. And the jobs that I loved doing were the ones where we were changing something dramatically. So what I didn't like was weeding, because that's not design, is it? And that's not building. That's just maintenance. That's like sweeping up. What I did like doing is digging a pond, putting in a liner, and then putting some concrete slab crazy paving around it and building a rockery and planting it up, and then going and buying some fish and then putting some plants in. I mean, I found that absolutely lovely and satisfying in every way. I guess that's the first time I have ever actually did any designing or building. The other thing my parents got us to do is they were always broke. So we had a load of kind of post-war utility plywood furniture that was all kind of dark brown. And they decided they were going to get all the kids to paint their furniture gloss white. And we'd never picked up a paintbrush before. And you imagine like a flat 40s wardrobe painted with gloss white paint with no primer and no sanding back, with loads of runs all over it. You know, I quickly realised that painting was actually quite difficult. You need some training. And I knew I'd done a really terrible job. Maybe that sowed a little seed. I don't want to be that bad at something. How difficult can it be to paint a cupboard? So maybe there was a seed sown there, but I suppose I loved art at school. That was one of the subjects I could do, and that wasn't tedious and I didn't have to revise for. That was fun. We did a little bit of woodworking, but we didn't do design technology like they do at schools now. So it's a shame, really, because I think my kids do a lot more designing and making at school than I ever did. So it wasn't really until I left school and went to uni. Well, actually, it was art college at the time. I did a foundation course. And when I was 17, I started that. And I remember the most overriding feeling that I had when I was there was that everybody was so much more talented than I was. And they were all artists. They could draw, they could paint, they could sculpt. And they were passionate and they had ideas and they wanted to express themselves. And I didn't have any ideas. I wanted to express myself, but I didn't know what to express. And I quickly found out that I'm not an artist. Even though I applied to do a fine art degree after my foundation, I wanted to be an artist, but I wasn't an artist and I didn't know it. I just felt like I wanted to be as good as they were. And I didn't get into that course because they could see I was no artist. And it wasn't until a couple of years later when I retook my A-levels and I got into university to do industrial design, which is like a product design course. And at that point, I was in my element. I'd been a lazy teenager. I'd failed and suffered and watched all my friends go off to uni, and I was stuck at home working in a factory. And it was a tough pill to swallow. And it was the thing I needed to give me the determination to actually get my head down, get some A-level results that would get me into university so that I could do what all my friends were doing. And I never had that motivation before. I was lazy. I didn't like studying. I wasn't very good at a lot of subjects. So foundation was certainly the spark. And then I had to have a word with myself. So I needed to go back home to live with my parents and work in an engineering factory where I was just working on a pillar drill all day. And the people I was rubbing shoulders with were not the type of people that I was at college with. And I felt like I'm missing out. I wish I was doing what they're doing. And I needed that drive because I didn't have it before. And then finally, when I chose the right course because I had enough time. It took me 3 years to get into uni. And when I finally got on the course, I was a little bit older. Instead of at school where I was a year younger than everyone, I was a couple of years older than everyone. And they were all messing about and I wasn't messing about. I was focused. I loved every single project.
And it's funny that you started out restoring other people's furniture. You had an eye, you had an appreciation for the work that had gone into it, for the design of it.
Well, I didn't love old furniture and traditional styling when I came out of uni. You imagine when you do a design course that you're going to be designing a kettle or a toaster that you're going to see on the shelves in John Lewis. That's your aspiration, or get a job working for Alessi, designing iconic household products that are going to go in every high street store. That's what you imagine you're going to do. But actually, when I finished uni, I set up a design consultancy and offered our services to anybody who wanted them. And that was pretty much nobody, because it was the middle of a recession. I didn't know what a recession was really until then. And we struggled to make ends meet. I found the clients quite scary, actually. I remember us all hiding underneath the tables when one of our clients came round, because he was not happy with the work that we had done.
I'm sure they were very nice tables, though.
No, they weren't.
Okay.
Your first table is not a good one. You look back on it, 20, 30 years later, and you think, oh, that was so naff. I hadn't developed my taste at that point. My own taste didn't really develop until I switched from a design consultancy to restoring antique furniture. And it was in the process of stripping furniture, where you put it in a caustic tank, and then when you open up the tank, the furniture is flat packed. The animal glue that held it all together is all dissolved, and there's literally individual planks floating on the surface of the tank. So you wash them all down with a pressure washer, and then you try and fit them back together like a big jigsaw puzzle, which, is quite easy to do. But in the process of doing that, you're aware of what a hand-cut dovetail from an 1850 chest of drawers looks like. And you become aware of how 1940s furniture is so different, is so utilitarian. They're machined dovetails, they don't have the character. The timber's different, it's got plywood in it. The pine is different, the grain is not so close together, it's much wider apart. It's really soft. You can put your fingernail into the timber, it's so soft. So you start recognizing the difference between timbers, the difference between the style of furniture. Does it look squat? Does it look elegant? Has it got round, ugly, bulbous feet? Has it got elegant, stylish feet? You start to notice every detail, the knob, the feet, the lip around the top of the piece of furniture, the cornice on the wardrobe. You become familiar with every detail, and there's no doubt about it. Georgian and Victorian furniture is made far better than furniture is made today. And when you're putting back together all these pieces of furniture, then you can't help but fall in love with the people who made it. You're in awe of their skill, because it's there. Every single saw cut is there for you to see. So you put all these pieces of furniture back together again, and then when you find yourself designing furniture a couple of years later, without realizing it, when you pick up your propelling pencil, you start designing things that have the proportion and the detail and characteristics of all of that traditional furniture that you've spent years putting it back together, polishing it, and hopefully selling it. So that's where it came from. It didn't come from uni, didn't come from my childhood. It came from restoring antique furniture. It was a stroke of luck.
You clearly champion artisanship, clearly appreciate the skills that people have, and you make all your own stuff. But the word bespoke is used to describe so many different things in the kitchen industry. It's a word that can mean basically anything to anybody. And I was wondering how you feel when you see the word bespoke used in different contexts like that, because you truly are bespoke. You're getting planks of wood in and furniture comes out. How do you feel about the word bespoke?
Well, yeah, it's a very commonly used word. It's not a word I dislike. I do dislike some phrases commonly used by kitchen companies, like the heart of the home. Yeah, like nobody's heard that before. And of course, every small, brand new company, they read what's written on other kitchen furniture websites and brochures, and they mimic it. And yeah, offering something bespoke, whether you're making garden gates or curtains, it seems like, well, you're offering a better service, a more personal service. But what does bespoke actually mean? It means that it's not an off-the-shelf product, that in some way it's been adapted to suit your situation. And the reason the kitchen business is such a good business for manufacturers in the UK is because bespoke elements really are necessary. If you're buying lights, for example, you can just buy an off-the-shelf light. You wouldn't really think about asking somebody to make you a light that doesn't currently exist, as there's no point and it would be really expensive. But with a kitchen, you've got these little nooks and crannies, and you've got a room which is not exactly square. You've got curved walls. And if you're importing your standard cabinets from China, there's going to be times when they don't fit. Whereas if you're making in this country, you make a piece of furniture that does fit. So it really is bespoke, and it's necessarily bespoke. But I have my limits on how bespoke people should ask for things to be. In America, interior designers, they convince their clients to have everything bespoke. And so every single piece of furniture is almost a one-off. And that's a bit of pot luck. You might get lucky and throw a load of elements together that, you know, look amazing and nobody's ever done it before. But the chances of that happening are really slim. The chances are it's going to look like a dog's dinner. When we're designing furniture, we design it so the proportions are correct. And for me, it's not about what you like and what you dislike. It's about what's right and what's wrong. So, for example, if you were to design a drawer that was 2 meters wide, that's wrong. That's a very ungainly drawer. It's very difficult to keep that running smoothly. So yeah, drawers, there's a limit to how wide they should be. And of course, if it's a narrow drawer, it only needs one knob in the middle. And if it's a wider drawer, then 2 knobs would be suitable. But how wide does it need to be before 2 knobs are suitable? Well, there's a dimension when it's necessary. And how far apart should those knobs be? Well, there's a distance that is right. And the way you find out what's right is you look at old furniture. And it's right because they made it like that for hundreds of years. And it's also right because it's what's familiar in your head. You've got a kind of memory for design and you're not really aware of it. But when you walk into a house and you're drawn to something, a piece of furniture, and you think, oh, what a lovely hall table or dresser, you're drawn to it because it instills kind of warm feelings inside you. It's a pleasant experience. And I believe that it's not because you're seeing something that you've never seen before. Most of the time, it's because you're seeing something that is really familiar, and it's probably from your childhood. And it might be a favourite grandparent, you know, who kept her favourite china on it. There's some part of it that has an emotional connection with you. And so when you're designing furniture and you put the knobs in exactly the right place, because I see knob placement in exactly the wrong place. For example, you might see kitchen wall cupboards with the knob placed in the very bottom corner of the door. And on a base cabinet, you might see a knob that's placed in the very top corner of the door. And yet, if you looked at an old Welsh dresser or, you know, any Georgian Victorian furniture with drawers in it, you will never see knobs in those positions, doors or drawers. Never ever will you see them in those positions. So somebody's put them there because they thought it was more convenient, easier to reach. But actually, there's a very practical reason why they put them lower down. And there's another part of it, and that is that you look at it and you think it looks right, even though you don't know why. Making things bespoke, like even just changing the position of the knob, it's bespoke, but it's wrong. Making things bespoke, there should be a reason for it. You know, if you've got a little alcove and a standard piece of furniture doesn't fit and you want a piece of furniture made that's a little bit narrower, well, that's very, very sensible. Good choice. But choosing to add elements for no good reason, just because it makes it different, I don't think that's necessary. Because I think our designs are right. We've designed every piece of furniture from scratch to get those proportions exactly right. And if we thought it would look better if it was a couple of inches wider, we would have made it a couple of inches wider. So people who are drawn to the Devol look, they generally accept our standard designs, and you only make bespoke cupboards when you need to.
What I love about what you do is it's like a two-pronged thing. One is that the artisanship element of it, 'cause it's not just the furniture, you've got the ceramics, you've got metalwork, you've got everything going on there. it's a big part of the Devolve story. And I think your clients will love telling the Devolve story to their friends when they come round about how somebody's handcrafted this and has made this. So it's a big part of the story, but it's not a gimmick. You're doing it because it's, for all the reasons you describe, it is exactly the right thing to do, rather than it being just about novelty.
Yeah, absolutely. I got so excited when we started doing different products made out of different materials. My niece was studying jewellery, and I had the idea, because when you're looking for the perfect catch or the perfect handle, I loved all the old ones. And there's a certain antique shop that I go to where they've got loads and loads of old handles and knobs and escutcheons, all the fittings that come off old pieces of furniture. And I love them. They're perfect, but I can only find one or two. So what I really wanted is I wanted to recreate really authentic fittings for our furniture, because what I could buy, everybody else could buy, and it wasn't right. It just wasn't as well made. It was pressed plate instead of being sand cast. So it didn't have that weight to it. It didn't have that thickness to it. It didn't have that patination. Didn't have the little bits of pitting in it that you get with sand casting. So I persuaded my niece to come and work for Devolve. And she said, what am I going to do at Devolve? I make jewellery. And I said, make jewellery for houses. So she came and she set up the metal department. Steph O'Leary is her name. And the metal department, we started designing handles and knobs, and then we moved on to designing our own type of hinges, and we started designing switches and sockets and fittings for lighting. And I got so excited by having a metal department and being let loose and designing in a new material. And we set up a ceramics department, and that was so challenging. And I found that really, really fulfilling. There's nothing a designer likes more than a problem that is difficult to solve. And ceramics is just the hardest discipline to master. If anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. Wet mud is what you're working with, and it won't do what you want it to do. And you can put hundreds of hours of labour into the contents of a kiln and open the door and the whole lot could be shattered. It's a fantastic test of your patience. I actually remember saying, I think everybody should be forced to study ceramics because it will teach you patience, and it will teach you to get used to the idea of, oh dear, that's gone horribly wrong. What can I do to make it not go horribly wrong next time? Did I fire it at too high a temperature? Did we not fire it for long enough? Did we cool the kiln down too quickly? Did I throw it too thin? Is this clay really susceptible for shattering when it's fired with this glaze? You know, there are 1,000 different reasons why it could go wrong. And for me, as an aging designer, no longer young and excited by everything and anything, when I have a new material and I find that I'm a complete novice, that all of a sudden is such a lovely challenge. And of course, you're working with new graduates and they're all learning it for the first time. It was so much fun. And then, of course, the products that we were designing, the ideas come from the designers, the guidance comes from the directors. We have this kind of developed taste, which is rooted in tradition, and they have some skills that they've learned at college, and they have this energy and drive, and working together is just perfect. We understand what our clients want, and so we can direct them to get the glaze just right. So it's a colour that we think our clients are going to want to see in their kitchen. It's a style that we think our clients will be drawn to. And young designers don't necessarily get that. They don't get middle-aged people's choices in style. So I think it works really well. We've recently moved into glassware. That's another fantastic medium that we're learning from scratch. And now we've got, a range of lighting that's made out of ceramics. It's got metal components in it. There's glass lighting, and they sell all over the world. And it's to go through that journey, and it's only about 6 years, that whole journey with metal, ceramics and glass. In 6 years, suddenly we've got an online shop and it sells £15 million worth of accessories every year, more than half of them to America. And yet 6 years ago, we didn't even have a kiln. So yeah, that was super exciting, and that's kept me interested And working with young designers, it gives me energy. I don't know why, but it makes me want to come into work in the morning.
The problems to solve, as you say, designers like problems to solve.
It's a disease. We can't help it. We literally can't help it. You see something and it's just wrong and it doesn't work, and you just can't understand how anybody let that go.
Can we talk about your TV show for a minute?
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm quite fascinated by it, and I'll tell you why. The whole aesthetic of it is fantastic, and it has this kind of laid back, I don't know, repair shop, river cottage kind of approach to it, which is brilliant because it gets across the personality of Duvall so well. But it's such an antithesis to the usual makeover show format. The usual makeover shows are about get in there, get out, we've got a week to do it, rush it along, whereas it's so sort of slow, deliberately so, and it really shows the relationship you have with the client and the conversations you have with your client. It's the only show I've seen which really shows what it's like getting a new kitchen.
Well, it's really nice to hear you say that.
How much of that was you, and how much of that was the production company spotting that would work for you?
We were very reluctant to do the TV show. Not reluctant, we were nervous. We're old, and we're nervous about that. You know, I wish I'd done it when I was 40, when I was a young man, because 40 is very young when you get to my age. There's a lot of things you can do at 40 you can't do at 60. But anyway, we were nervous because, you know, clearly this is our business, and if this show was naff, this would be a bad thing for us to do. And there's a lot of naff makeover shows. I grew up with changing rooms, and everything's bodged. You know, everything's slapped on. Everything's stuck on with double-sided tape, and it'll last for 5 minutes. You know, that's the very opposite of what Duvall is. So we wanted it to be really genuine. We wanted to show the antique shopping. We wanted to show all the designing and making, show how it actually happens. And we didn't want a quick wham bam, thank you man, you know, here's a before shot, here's an after shot, here's some happy customers going, wow, I love it, you know, with no real content. And so before we agreed to do the show, we kind of negotiated to be consultant editors with a right to make changes to how they'd edited it if we felt like it needed it. And I'm very pleased that they embraced that. It's still very frustrating. Helen got really frustrated. I remember we went to visit Charleston House, which is where the Bloomsbury Group gained fame for their creative works, you know, writing, ceramics, painting. I mean, they're a fascinating group of people. We were invited to go down there with the TV company, and we, of course, start falling in love with so many different aspects in the house. And Helen's literally waxing lyrical about something, and the cameraman drops his camera, you know, not drops it, but it just lowers it so it's pointing at the floor. And then you stop and you go, oh, are you not interested in what I've got to say here? And, you know, he's got the editor telling him that they need 3 things from this filming day. They need us to talk about copper, they need us to talk about sinks, and they need us to talk about, I don't know, working triangles. And so everything that you talk about that isn't on that subject, they're just going, you know, they're just being polite by filming you. We didn't really get that. But we did 2 series, so we did learn something. So the frustration that we suffered in the first series, we kind of understood. We need to stay on point. We've still got an opinion. We've still got passion about the thing that they need. And we'll stop just getting excited and interested in everything that we see. And we'll say to them, what do you need? And they go, I want you to stand over here and I want you to talk about that light. And you go, okay, that's fine. So we'll do that. Because if we've got an opinion on the light, you know, when we walked in, we had an opinion on 15 different things, but they want the opinion on the light. So that's fine. We'll just talk about that.
But I can see why, you know, the whole aesthetic of the show, I can see why it's so popular in America. Do you get kind of people leaping out at you in restaurants and sort of shoving a piece of paper under you and saying, I'm having some trouble with my island unit or something?
No, that's never happened, strangely. No, they just want selfies and they want to talk to you. I mean, it doesn't happen, you know, when I wander around in Leicestershire or London for that matter. But it does when I go to America, and it does in Bath because there's so many Americans in Bath. And actually, there's more and more English people that have seen the show recently because it's on Freeview now. I was talking to a lady the other day, and I was just walking through the showroom, probably going for a pee, and she said, "Oh, And I knew what that meant. So I turned around and I said, "Oh, hello, I've become far." And she was English. And she said, well, I have actually, even though I'm English and I'm from around here, but now I live in Florida. And I said, "Oh, so you come back visiting family and you looked us up?" And she said, "Yeah, well, I was just scrolling looking for something to watch and I saw For the Love of Kitchens and I thought, oh, that sounds right up my street." So she started watching it and then she thought, "Oh my God, I know this company. They used to have a little shop in Quorn." And I was so pleased to hear it. I mean, she loved it even more because it was kind of from her home county and she'd seen our little shop. And she was proud of it. She was proud of the journey that we'd been on and the place that we had got to. And I found that fascinating. And I was really pleased because one of the things I was worried about when we started doing the show was if you show a company that's got showrooms in London and showroom in New York, then I know what a carpenter who's got a workshop in his garage and he's, making bits of furniture for people's houses, doing the odd garden gate and the odd fitted wardrobe in the eaves of a bungalow. And then he sees this company and they've got everything and they've made it. He doesn't like us. He hates us. And his thought process is, well, it's all right for them. They've got these fancy showrooms. I could never sell a piece of furniture for that kind of money. I don't have those kind of clients walk through my door. So I was really, really intent that they showed the beginnings of Devolt, that we started in a garage, stripping doors over a hot, steaming caustic soda tank. And that even the second and the third premises that we occupied were, really dodgy industrial estate and a rubbish old unit, very little space, because I wanted people who were in the position that we were in, because we were broke for 15 years, couldn't pay the rent, always struggled to pay the rent. And my business partner left after 10 years because we didn't make any money, and his family was saying, "What are you doing? You've got a degree, why don't you get a job and earn some proper money?" Literally, we were broke the whole time. And I wanted people to know that it is possible, that you might feel like you're busting a gut and you're not getting anywhere, but you're learning your trade and you're becoming expert at something. I remember thinking also when I opened a shop in London for the first time, it was only about 10 years ago, less than that. I remember thinking, God, it's so easy to sell kitchens in London. People make decisions really quickly. And I think when you start a business further north, and we're in the Midlands, people look after their money. They don't spend it quickly. They think about how they're going to spend it for years sometimes. And we learned our craft and we became very good at it and became really efficient and really a good value at great quality, but not silly prices is where we ended up. And so by the time we did open a shop in London, we were offering something that actually was fantastic value. And if we'd done that in my first few years in business, I would have lost an awful lot of money. So actually, the fact that we were broke for a long time, I think it paid dividends because we learned the hard way, and it means that what you get for your money really is good value. It really is good quality. And that will always matter, whether you're in London or New York or Bath. People still want value for money and they still want good quality. So starting a business in a tough environment, going through recessions, being in a pretty ordinary market town in the Midlands, it's a pretty good place to cut your teeth. And anybody who's been running a business for 5 or 10 years and feeling like, oh, I'm barely making ends meet here, my advice is just don't give up. You're learning so much and you're getting better than all the people who have just started. And there'll come a point when you just have a little bit of money where you can make that next step. And it might just be a few £1,000s. I remember when we bought our first piece of woodworking machinery, because we were just stripping doors and we wanted a circular saw and we wanted a mortiser so we could make furniture. But we literally had no money at all just to pay the rent. But we managed to scrabble together £550 and we bought a second-hand 80-year-old Wadkin circular saw and £150 60-year-old Wadkin mortiser. And with those two pieces of machinery, we made furniture for about the next 10 years. Even though the circular saw cut at 89 degrees, we found a way to make it work. Those people who feel like, God, business is so hard, I'm getting nowhere, I wanted our story and the TV show to reflect that. You can still make it. You can still become something that people have heard of and talk about. Just because you've not been successful in the first 15 years doesn't mean you can't be successful in the next 15 years.
I think the show does do that very successfully. And funnily enough, speaking of former furniture restorers, I was talking to a mutual acquaintance of ours recently, Charlie Smallbone.
Oh, yes, I know him well.
And I told him I was going to speak to you. Do you want to know how he described you?
Yeah, I'd love to.
He says, Paul is a total one-off in our industry who just paddles his own canoe and takes the long view, something he's definitely earned the right to do.
Oh, how sweet.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's nice. Thank you, Charlie.
Well, I asked him if he was going to interview you, what question he'd ask. Because I say it's funny, your journey is very similar in many ways.
Very
because you both started off doing that furniture, yeah.
Remarkably.
So his question was, at both Smallbone and Paris Ceramics, we did a significant proportion of our sales in the USA. So how easy did you find it to establish Devol there?
Charlie, I mean, when I was starting in kitchens, I looked at all of the kitchen suppliers, you know, who had fancy brochures and shops in nice towns. And they were so far away from what we were and where we were. And I was fascinated to meet Charlie 20 years later and to learn his story, so similar to mine. He used to strip antique pine furniture. He was probably a little bit more gung-ho than me, and maybe, I don't know, maybe he had a bit more disposable cash. I literally was totally broke for such a long time. So he opened a shop in New York, and he started actually from a hotel room in New York. So he arranged meetings with clients, and he'd go to a nice coffee shop, and he'd sit down with them, and it was his Englishness and his charm that made these American clients be drawn to him and take his advice. So that's how he did it. I don't know. I think maybe he's got a little bit more bravado than I have. I wouldn't have dreamt of doing that, when I was in my 20s. I felt like a beginner. He must have had much higher aspirations much earlier in life than I did. But I know him well now, and he's a lovely chap. We've done some work together, which I enjoyed.
So whose idea was it to go over to the US? Because you've got such an English appeal, you've got such an English story to tell. You can see why the Americans would love it. But whose idea was it to get on the plane?
It was mine, and I think I'd got to a point in life where I just thought, why not? What the hell? Well, how amazing would that be? Everyone's going to go, really? Devol, that little company from Loughborough, have opened a shop in New York. It just makes you sound like a completely different animal. And I thought it would make people think of our brand differently. Not long before that, we were just a local cabinet making firm, of which there are hundreds of them around the country. The showroom in London, the quality of our photos, and then the fact that we opened a shop in New York suddenly set us apart. And we did such a good job of that showroom. And God, it was so difficult. The planning restrictions in New York and getting through all their red tape is a nightmare. And we thought it was going to cost us about £250,000 to fit out the showroom, and it ended up costing us £1.25 million because of all the ridiculous costs of all of the different engineers you have to get involved in, new aircon and everything. It's just a nightmare. But we did such a good job of it. And once you've started, of course, you can't stop. You have to spend the money. You have no choice. But we didn't hold back. The first thing you step onto when you walk into that showroom is a 150-year-old Minton tile floor, which arrived in a pallet, having been taken up from a garden path in London. And we chipped off all the cement and cleaned up all these little squares and triangles, and we shipped it over to New York, and we made a little entrance hall with this 150-year-old Minton tile floor. Now that isn't easy to do. And you have to be really bloody minded and really determined to go to those lengths to do something special. But it looks really special. And when you talk to American customers and they go, oh, I love that floor, where's that from? Well, that's a 150-year-old Minton tile floor pulled up from a garden in London. There's a story behind it. And they loved it. And how did I decide to do it in the first place? It's just the sheer boyish excitement of the whole idea of it. It wasn't something that was a committee sat down and did some number crunching. It was just me as the founder of a business thinking, wouldn't it be ridiculous, having started where we started, to have a showroom in Manhattan on Bond Street, which is such a beautiful street and so many famous people live there. It was kind of, if somebody had told me 2 years earlier, I would have said no. The chances of that happening are 1 in a billion, and that's why I did it.
Look, let's round this up, Paul, if we can, by asking what's next for you, really. I wonder what ambitions you've got left. You say you like working with the youngsters coming in. I think that's very admirable.
I love it.
What's left in your head?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think I waver between thinking, have I done enough? Should I take it easy now? I'm 60. But then I also have this other part of me which goes, hold on, you just spent 35 years getting into the Premier League. Well, what about winning the Premier League? What about making it to the Champions League? What about winning the FA Cup? I haven't done those things yet. So it's kind of like, well, why get so close and then stop? And the key to that is whether you still enjoy it, of course. And I still love coming into work. So yeah, we have got plans. I think LA showroom is something that I'm revisiting as a distinct possibility. Edinburgh, really want to open a showroom in Edinburgh. We've got a lot of customers up there. It would be nice if they had somewhere a little bit closer to home. I think we're done with TV shows. If we do any more TV work, it'll be something that we've created. It'll be more like a documentary or a one-off day in the life of a Devol designer kind of thing. So that I'm quite interested to keep my options open there. So what else? We've just bought a new site which is going to enable us to do something which we've always wanted but have never had the opportunity, and that is to get all of our manufacturing in one place. Because as you grow, you kind of keep looking for something that's big enough for you, but then you quickly outgrow it, and then you start adding on lots of other little ones, and you end up with 6 different workshops and vans going backwards and forwards, taking bits of furniture from one place to another, and it's grossly inefficient. We've only just managed to find a site where we can build workshops, where we can do everything in one place, and that's very exciting. I really want to see that out. I want to stand in that workshop and see where we've got to, because there's 400 people work at Devol now, but you'd never see those people all together because they work in dozens of different places. And when I think back to the tiny little garage that we started in, I feel like that would be a nice little place to draw a line under it and go, we've finally created what I think is, the perfect carpentry workshop that can make high quality furniture at scale and take untrained people and turn them into skilled cabinet makers, and not the old fashioned way, because it's not practical. You have to train cabinet makers in a way that embraces new technology. They don't need to be able to use a chisel anymore. In a modern factory making high quality carpentry, actually it's impossible because you just can't find enough highly skilled cabinet makers. So you actually only have a handful of those, and everybody else is being trained in some small part of what you do, and they're becoming quite technical. So you have quite a lot of computer controlled machines, and that might be quite different from how people see Devol. But we didn't cover it up on the show. We showed CNC machines buzzing away and Robin explaining why we used them. And if you try to ignore that, because our customers, they dwell in that traditional style, but the reality of running a business is, well, unless you want to pay £100,000 for your kitchen, you need to embrace modern machinery. And we could only do 5 kitchens a year because that's how many highly skilled cabinet makers we could find. So I think seeing that new workshop all fitted out and running perfectly, that's a goal that I've not yet achieved. I'm really keen to achieve. So we just want to open a few more showrooms that makes it a little bit easier for people who already like Devol, already buy from us, but it's very inconvenient for them to visit one of our showrooms because Most kitchen companies have 30 showrooms. We have 6. We've kept it quite small and manageable, and we've made each site a destination and made it really special. As Charlie would say, I'm paddling my own canoe. Nobody else did it like that. The interesting one thing that Charlie said to me, he said, never open a showroom on the coast, because I was thinking of Brighton. And I said, why not? And he said, half the catchment area. And I went, yeah, I suppose that's one way of looking at it.
Well, look, Paul, thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking to you, and Devol's such an enigma in this industry that I'm so glad we've had the chance to get behind the scenes a little bit. So thank you again for all your time, and we'll catch up again soon.
Well, Andrew, you're very generous with the things that you've said, and I'm very grateful for that. And thanks for your interest as well. It does, make it feel worthwhile when you've been doing something all your life, and then just getting a little bit of recognition, setting you apart from all the other kitchen companies. It's a little reward that you've given me today, and I'm very grateful for it. So thank you.